Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tinsel Town Live with Miz Meliz. I'm Melissa Reyes, and tonight I have with me a very special guest. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I have Dr. Margaret Rutherford, and she joins us tonight to talk about this concept that she has. And I can't wait to find out more about it. And it's hard to be excited about something like this, but you'll understand why in a little bit. It's called perfectly hidden depression. And depression is something I'm very aware of in my life, in my family, my parents, my children. And so, that concept of not knowing or not being able to detect that somebody's depressed is so serious. So Dr. Rutherford is here to talk about it with us tonight. So welcome, Margaret. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been in private practice for a little over, almost 25 years now. And I practice in Fayetteville, Arkansas, home of the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Oh, okay. Yes.
You can't live in Arkansas without being a Razorback fan.
And basketball or football or?
Oh, well, it's basketball, track, everything, but football right now. We just beat Florida last week.
Gotcha. Well, good for you. Go Arkansas. We've been talking about the states lately and what it's like to visit each state and how every state has a special flair and a characteristic that makes it so unique. And I've enjoyed recently visiting Tennessee for the first time.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I loved it. I really did.
So, I went to school there in Tennessee. I went to school in Memphis, Tennessee.
I spent one night in Memphis at the Gaylord. No, the Gaylord was at Nashville at
Peabody.
Peabody.
Where the Ducks are.
Yes. It was really wonderful. It was a great little town. So, and of course, we went to Graceland. So, where did you go to school?
I went to what's now called Rhodes College, and it's a small liberal arts college, and it kind of looks like you're in the middle of Great Britain. Really, when you're there, it's very all the buildings are made of stone, and it just kind of was this little sequestered place. So, I went there quite a while ago.
Especially if you've been in practice for 25 years.
Yeah.
People are always shocked I've been married for 25 years. That's an institution. So, but yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but isn't it just so nice and refreshing to say, that's where I went to school and that's what I did,
Well, sure. I got my PhD at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School in Dallas.
There you go.
So, my sort of second round of education there in Dallas. It was wonderful.
That's fantastic. And have you been to California? That's where I'm at.
Well, I've been to California lots of times, but my son just recently moved to LA. So I was just there in August, in LA in August, and he's working at SpaceX there with Elon Musk. I'm sure he's Elon Musk's right-hand man after 4 months.
That was really interesting. We exchanged some conversation via Facebook Messenger, I think, and you were telling me about your son. He's mechanical engineering.
That's right.
Very new.
So anyway, he's really loving it, and he's getting to know LA, and so I can't wait to get to know it better myself. Come visit.
Well, I hope to meet you here one time soon.
That'd be fun. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, so have you written a book about this subject, or are you studying it? What is it that you've done?
I have a book proposal on perfectly hidden depression. I'll tell you the story, okay, because I think it's kind of interesting. Okay. I've been blogging now since 2012, and one Saturday about, I think it was April of 2014, I sat down in my sunroom just to think about writing another post. And I was thinking about this young woman that I was treating at the time who initially came in for an eating disorder. She was a binge eater. She ate lots of food, at one time. And she came in about 4, 5, 6 sessions maybe into our beginning. And she said, Margaret, remember when you asked me about sexual abuse in our first session? And I said, yeah, I do remember that. And she said, well, I've got something to tell you. And I said, okay. And she said, well, I was raped the week before I started college. I looked at her and I said, okay. And she said, but you know what? I didn't remember it, and I didn't really think it was all that important. So I just didn't tell you.
Huh.
And the interesting thing, Melissa, was that as she was telling me this, she was smiling. She had this not like grin on her face, but there was no painful emotion associated with it.
Okay.
None. It was just sort of, well, yeah, this happened. And
Yeah.
so I noticed that, and I said something to her about it. And then what happened was that, of course, what I found out was that there were several things she was keeping to herself that she had discounted. And so I was thinking about her and some of the other people that I had seen in the past that were similar to her. And I wrote a post called "The Perfectly Hidden Depressed Person, Are You One?" Now, at that time, maybe I was getting 100 Facebook shares or likes on a really popular post. The post went viral.
Oh, wow.
And then it was one of my first posts on Huffington Post. It also went viral there. And what I didn't realize in the Huffington Post was that I had left my email on the bottom of the post saying, if you identify with this, I'd like to hear from you.
Okay.
So
you get a
200, 150, 200 emails later in 24 hours.
Oh my God.
I was just inundated with, yes, this is me. I get this. How did you figure this out? I've never seen this anywhere. One person even said, I was thinking about committing suicide today, but this is going to make me think about it. So I realized, Melissa, that I had touched something that people weren't talking about. So that was at the time that I began researching, looking at what else was out there about depression that didn't look like classic depression. Perfectly hidden depression are people who they look great. They've got a lot of friends. They're successful. They work hard. They're driven. They're caring. They volunteer. They are the movers and shakers of our world. And yet they have some trauma from their past, or they have learned that it's not okay to talk about painful things. They learned it in their family. They learned it in their relationships now. And they have very carefully decided that whatever pain they have, they're going to put it in a box and close the box tightly and shove it in their closets at the farthest corner of the closet and try to function. And what happens is, over time, is that doesn't work. It begins to creep up on them.
Couldn't that be pretty much everybody, though? Is it?
Well, I've gotten that feedback, and of course, there are things. I remember the day my dog died. It was about a little over a year ago, and I love this dog, and we love the dog, and I put that pain in a box and put it up on my closet shelf and went to work. I had people who wanted to see me. So, of course, compartmentalization, which is the fancy psychological term for what I'm talking about, is something all healthy people do. We compartmentalize pain. We don't let it overrun our daily functioning, right?
Right.
But what perfectly hidden depression do is that's their only strategy. They don't have anybody that really knows them. That's their go-to, their only go-to.
And it festers.
And they don't know how to get, when I got home that day, I got that box out and sobbed about my dog. Someone with perfectly hidden depression wouldn't do that.
Right.
They would leave it in the box, and they would never get it out and decide this is important to work through. That's the difference.
Do they think about it? Does it haunt them like a baggage, or is it just really, I don't know what you're talking about, but part of the brain still knows?
I've done almost 40 interviews with people who have emailed me and said, I'd like to help you with your research. And I would say a third of those people have intentionally done this. They had childhood experiences that made this the best strategy for them. They may have had alcoholic parents, or they may have had to take care of their younger brothers and sisters, or there may not have been enough food in the house. I mean, it depends. It may have been abused in some way. The other 2/3, they don't necessarily do it intentionally. It's just they are so accustomed to functioning in that way that they realize something's wrong, that they're not quite who they pretend to be, but they don't know what's wrong. And until they get suicidal or until something really bad happens, then they don't wake up. For example, I would have people tell me when I was asking them questions during the interviews, the few that about the maybe third or so that had gone into therapy, they would say, do you want me to answer this question like before I went to therapy or after I went to therapy? So
they had a side that they knew they could answer.
Yes.
Honestly, but not really.
When they answered as if they had never gone to therapy, it was, no, I never, I always took responsibility. I never shared my feelings with anybody. None of my friends knew who I was. None of my, not even maybe my spouse knew that I had cut as a teenager or I had tried to attempt suicide one time. Nobody knew that about me. These are perfectionistic people. They are worriers. They are planners. They believe in counting their blessings as almost a way of functioning. Like, that's great too. Counting your blessings is wonderful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you can't say, but we're getting to something.
But when you only can count your blessings and you use it as a way to shame yourself when you're not, or when you're having a down day, or when you actually have something that is troubling you, no, I'm supposed to count my blessings. I can't feel that. Right.
They're not accepting that whatever flaw or problem is, so they're just masking. Right?
Exactly. These people aren't comfortable with their vulnerabilities at all.
I think you've already answered my question, but it was floating in my head about, can a person have more than one kind of depression? Can you be depressed and be acknowledging that and still have a perfectly hidden depression as well? Or is it around one thing? That's too many questions. I always do that.
No, that's good. I followed you. Well, let me make a couple of points. Okay. Perfectly hidden depression is not a diagnosis. Okay. It's a term that a term that I coined. I've also seen it called high functioning depression, smiling depression. So you're not going to find perfectly hidden depression in any diagnostic manual. Okay. It is more a syndrome of behaviors, which is a group of behaviors that tend to fall together that are going to help the person deny that they have any depression. So they can be, well, okay, let me say this first too. In classic depression, what happens is there's some symptoms you have to be diagnosed with classic depression. Okay. There's depressed mood, which of course you have to admit, and two, anhedonia. And what anhedonia is the lack of pleasure in previously pleasurable activities.
Oh, okay.
Those two things have to be present for mild, moderate, or severe depression to be diagnosed.
Okay.
So when you think about that, and you think about someone who might be exhibiting perfectly hidden depression, they're not going to admit a depressed mood. And two, they don't look anhedonic. They are engaged. They are active. Why are
they having therapy then?
Well, there are a lot of people that don't have therapy. Oh. The people that I have seen that come into therapy, like the woman I talked about in a little while, she had a binge eating disorder and she was getting tired of going back and forth in her weight. She didn't think she was depressed. I've had people come in because of relationship problems. I've had people come in because of anxiety and fatigue. And in fact, many people have told me that when they do go to a therapist, that the therapist will say to them, well, you must just need to kind of slow down because you don't look depressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a tragic story that I just heard about 3 weeks ago, of a 17-year-old young man I'm going to write about this pretty soon, of a 17-year-old son. I talked to the mother who didn't look depressed at all, but who was confiding in one friend that he was suicidal, that he cried himself to sleep every night, that he was actively suicidal. The young girl contacted the high school counselor and said, I'm really worried about this young boy.
Good for her.
The high school counselor said, I see him all the time. He's not depressed. And he hung himself 3 weeks later.
Oh, that's terrible.
After he told a friend. So
is that something in the training? I mean, that, you know.
Yes. We've got a very rigid idea of what depression looks like. And it looks like the commercial you see on television with the guy sitting on the bathroom floor not wanting to walk the dog, you know?
Right.
That's what we've got in our minds. Now, you've got bipolar depression, which can look more agitated and anxious, or can look kind of hypomanic. You've got different genres of depression. But I'm trying to get the word out that mental health professionals need to pay attention to this because they can miss it, and then someone can. How many times has it happened when you've heard about somebody killing themselves and you say, God, I just saw her like a month ago, and she looked like she had the world by the tail. Right.
There are very few people that I've heard of when they have ended their life in that way that I wasn't completely shocked. The ones that I accepted were risk. They were, psychotic, and that's always a risk, but when most people, I think, get that down, they don't tell people, or if people they did tell don't believe them because and of course things come out later, or you look in hindsight at, and the classic example is, the actor that Robin Williams, thank you. It's my part. But so everybody's like, oh, he's so wonderful, and he's so happy, and he's a comedian, and then you find out that a lot of people knew that he was troubled and that he had battled that for a long time. And I know with myself with depression that people don't realize I'm depressed because I'm a happy outwardly happy person, and I totally can accept or understand that concept of walking depression, because I've had to actually convince employers and people that I was suffering from depression, because I could work, I could do anything.
I have an anxiety disorder. I have panic disorder, sort of a performance anxiety kind of thing. And I told somebody the other day, a guy I tailgate with, that I've tailgated with for 12 or 15 years. And I just kind of risked, and we were sitting around there talking, grilling something. And I said, I get real anxious at these tailgates. He looked at me and said, you gotta be kidding. Right. So people, and I probably do a pretty good job of hiding my anxiety, but not when I'm having a panic attack, unfortunately. But
I get social anxiety, or I don't want to go out, and that's why I love this kind of thing. Sometimes, and I was telling my son about it, and it surprised him at first, but then it made him feel better because he had something to go on, because he had been feeling the same way. Exactly. And nobody would ever know. And you might say, well, you're hiding it by people not recognizing it, but I look at that as pushing through it and doing the things you're supposed to do that do make you feel good, kind of facing the fear or the anxiety and just not ignoring it, but I don't have to put it on my resume, that I have these issues. Everybody has some issues. I'm dealing with it, but it's when it's like you're not accepting it or not able to label it that could be a problem, where you're saying, oh, no, I don't have that.
Well, we're also sort of dancing, we're not dancing around it, but there is such a stigma still in our culture about mental illness. I think it's changing gradually.
I think it's changing, but you're right.
And so one guy said to me, there's a thing called the Beck Depression Inventory. And it's these set of about, 15, 20 questions. It's been a long time since I've actually seen it, that say, do you feel hopeless? Do you feel have you lost weight? Do you feel like you don't want to do the things you used to do? Blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm familiar with that.
Oh, okay.
I've given it to people and I've taken it myself.
He said, for someone with perfectly hidden depression, they're asking the wrong question. He said, I would always say, do you feel hopeless? I would say no. Even if I did feel hopeless, I would say no, because I couldn't admit to feeling hopeless.
Right.
What the question should be for someone with perfectly hidden depression is, if you did feel hopeless, would you admit it?
Yes. That's a
And then they would say no.
Right. Right.
And that would reveal what's really going on with them. I thought it was a great comment.
That is a great comment. I would even take it a step further and say, just assuming when you feel hopeless, because how really can anyone not ever feel hopeless?
Right. Yeah.
What level or where do you go and what do you do? And have an interactive conversation in these questions rather than just the yes and no. And if you've got so many yeses, then okay, we'll give you a prescription for this.
Right. As a therapist, what I have found is I've worked with people that I suspect have this. It's almost like when I'm sitting in front of them, I have to, it would help if I closed my eyes almost, because if I look at how they're saying something to me, they're smiling and saying, oh, well, what's something else? Oh, one guy said, I had to be the star of every team when I was a kid, and I had to do well, and I hated piano, but my mom made me do a senior recital. Now, again, some of that stuff sounds okay. Well, what's that? But it was tremendous strain on this guy, tremendous strain.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if I had only paid attention to the way he looked and not what he was saying, I would not have caught that this was pressured for him, because he was smiling as he said it and sort of jovial. And if I had only paid attention to how he was saying it, I would have gone, oh, well, this isn't too much. So I had to listen real carefully and try to think, wait a minute, what would that be like for a kid? Mm. One woman years ago laughed out. She almost was guffawing when she said, there was always more beer in the fridge than there was food. And she was laughing. Yeah. And I looked at her and I said, well, wait. Why
would that be?
No, that was horrible. Yeah. And so she had to start admitting what that was really like.
And she was a child when she was growing up, that was her memory.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's funny how, for me, not funny, gosh, I don't know what other word to use. It's interesting for me when I have, when I'll share something with the kids, just so openly like that. Oh, when I was a kid, it was so different. We had cigarettes on the table, and it was fancy to have a crystal lighter. And this is one example I was saying not too long ago. And I was talking gloriously about my mother who's passed and saying how she loved to, entertain, and she would put these things out. And then to hear my son say it back to me in a way that sounded like that must have been horrible for you. I was like, oh, I didn't think of that as being a horrible thing. People smoked. There was cigarettes around. We had, I was involved in setting up, these parties and things. And that was just the way things were. I was proud of her. But, the perception is different. And if I looked at it from his eyes, or if I really put it in that way, that really wasn't something a child should be doing, or whatever, right. and being aware of. And that, I don't know, it's everybody's, I guess, I don't know what my point is, just that when you hear it back,
exactly,
you understand it in a different way.
A question I like to say to my patients is this. So if you could go back and say something to that child, what would you say as an adult? What would you say? Would you say, this is normal, don't worry about it? Or would you say, this is hurting you, and you're having to keep that hurt to yourself.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Your hurt is real. You've been told that you're not supposed to talk about anything sad. In fact, you might have even gotten punished for crying or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way it should be. Your pain is real.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's, and if you don't, that example is what I'm thinking of, but now that you've said that, I'm thinking of a lot of different things. And I really appreciate that you're bringing this to the public and writing your book, because I think it's so important. It's about the questions that you ask and what you're looking for. And you're going to be saving lives, Dr. Margaret. I want to say Dr. Rutherford. Margaret, my friend. You're going to be saving lives and building relationships. And that's such a wonderful thing. I'm so glad that I happened to see something on Instagram that triggered a conversation between us. And we know a lot of people in common, and through blogging and through the Midlife Boulevard, and, which is a wonderful group. I feel young in that group. Sorry. So I am on the younger
I feel old in that group.
No. But I feel.
Let's see, I'm in midlife if I live to be 124.
No way.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not in your 60s, are you?
I'm in 62.
Oh my
I am.
God, no way. Well, I get along with people of all ages. I'm not that much younger. But I like that group particularly because of the wealth of knowledge and expertise of the women who have lived and had such wonderful careers, and journalists like yourself. And are you a journalist?
No, I'm not. I'm a psychologist.
Psychologist.
I would not term myself a journalist.
There's somebody that I'm interviewing who's a psychologist and a journalist. I'm not sure. I have so many. I did a lot of multitasking today. Sorry. Take that back. But you, as a professional, and but there's so many people there that I just love to be around them, and especially in person, because they're a hoot, and they don't know who I am. They think because I look younger than I am, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, whatever. But anyway, this coming together, it always makes sense to me. And I feel like somebody out there, I'm getting some hearts and thumbs up and comments from Facebook. You can see over on the side, we have some people. Sorry,
I have to look here.
Now you can see, look at those skull glasses. I love it. That's my favorite.
I try not to open my mouth and look like a fish when I do that.
I have bifocals, so if I'm lost, it's because I'm
one of the most misunderstood things known of. You betcha, Kevin. That's the truth.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the stigma is lessening. It seems people are more aware of the issues, but more need to be educated. Yes. Yeah, I do think the stigma is lessening. It helps that people like Bruce Springsteen and Kid Cudi, I'm not sure how to say his last name, and other people, the woman Hayden Panettiere, I think that's how you say, had terrible postpartum depression, and she came out and talked about it. There have been others, but people that are celebrities, which of course, they bring attention to an issue, which is good. But I had this wonderful experience, absolutely wonderful experience of this guy, big strapping Southern boy. I mean, big husky. I have to strain to understand his accent a little bit. And he came in actually years ago because he had a friend die. And we did some treatment, and then he came back and said, I realized that I'm either not getting over my friend's death or something's wrong. And so we began looking at some of his history, and sure enough, he'd had, let me see, I don't want to reveal who he is. He'd had a loss in his family that was very tragic, and that his family had never quite gotten over. And his father especially was very critical of him growing up. So we worked on that and worked on this self-esteem issue and what I would term perfectly hidden depression in him, or at least some moderately. He wasn't severely, I don't think. But he came in one day, Melissa, and he said, well, I met met someone for coffee early this morning, and I said, "Oh, good. What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, I have this friend, another guy friend, and we were sitting in the come and go, and this is 6:30 in the morning. We were talking about our depression." And I just said, "Oh my God, how great."
Yeah. That's
two guys in their 20s sitting around talking about depression and admitting and revealing to each other about that. I said, "I'm so proud of you."
I don't know. I have a lot of theories about why they're so accepting and open. I like to think it's because of our generation raising these really awesome kids, and this next generation is just, they talk about a lot of their issues. I noticed that with my kids. I have 3 sons. They're 16, 19, and 21, and they'll hate me. Probably not hate me, but they're like, "Why are you talking about me again?" But they're used to it. But they are so open with their friends and with their situations, and there's issues that, like, with each other, there doesn't seem to be any off topic, topic that's off limits. However, it's still, you don't think your parents know anything, so you can never tell them. There's still this little and then we're telling them, "Oh, you shouldn't talk about that," or "You shouldn't put everything out on the internet because you want to get a job someday and you want to do this." So there's still this strange, is it okay?
Yeah.
Do I tell people at work that I'm taking a medication for, anxiety and depression?
Yeah.
I think it's okay to tell them, but other people I tell might think that's a terrible thing to say. It's really.
It'd be interesting to hear from some millennials. Of course, my son is a millennial as well, and I don't know what he would say. I would, if he's listening.
Yeah. Call in.
Call in.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of my office is 5 minutes from the University of Arkansas campus, so I see a lot of college age kids, and I would say a lot of them don't still admit coming to therapy. Now, that was very different when I moved to Fayetteville from Dallas, where you practically wore a badge that said, "I was in. Have you gotten therapy today?"
Right. Got therapy.
So it really depends on the area you live in. But we're still a little behind here in Arkansas, I think, as far as just openness to therapy. One thing I want to, because I'm sort of fond of this particular concept, I like to think of therapy as a particular.
Of course, you're fond of therapy.
Yeah, I'm very fond of it. I think it helps to think of therapy as a way of getting a consultation.
Oh,
if you were about to cook something you'd never cooked, you Google it, or you go look at Gianna De Laurentiis or whatever her name is on Food Network.
Sure.
And that's not right, but anyway. Or you would go consult. If you were about to build a deck and you never built a deck, you would go consult with someone who had built a deck. Well, therapists like me, I have seen 35 to 40 people a week for over 25 years. So I'm actually, it's not really all of my wisdom, although I hope I picked up a little. I'm also, I can tell you about, oh yeah, you're just like this person I saw 2 years ago, or this is what he or she did. We admire leaders who surround themselves with people that give them their opinion about what they should do. They consult presidents, chairmen of the board, people who run industry. Ask, what would you do in my case?
Sure, and that's an affirmation, right?
Exactly. And a therapist is just the same. For some reason, people tend to believe that, oh, I'm going to be told what to do. No, not a good therapist. What happens is that they will give you their recommendation, their opinion, based on their experience in listening to all these other people deal with similar issues. So if you can think of a therapist as a consultant, maybe it's a more helpful concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I haven't ever been in psychotherapy. I have been to counseling with the marriage and family counselor.
Yeah.
So that's my experience, but so similar in that, I feel like that's my go-to when I can't handle things on my own. The best thing that ever happened to me, I think, and I wrote about this in my book. I have a book called This Is the Sound of My Soul, and I wrote it 3 years ago. And it's really just a body of work that I had written for years up until that point as a blogger. But I worked, I wrote about it that it took a team because my doctor said, you should see the counselor, the whole, all of the depression and all the problems that came to a head. I needed to see somebody about, my diet. And I started just managing my healthcare, and that included my mental health and my emotional health.
Yeah, exactly.
And, getting everybody in sync. And it was a huge, awakening. And so since then, and I wasn't ashamed of that because I got help, I'm always telling people, and of course, as a life coach, if somebody has serious problems, I'm like, sometimes you need a team of people to help you, and you would do the same for them, so.
Well, it's you're still the one in charge. And so it's important to, if you go to a lawyer, they're going to give you the best legal advice you can get. If you go to your pastor, he or she's going to give you the best spiritual advice they know. You go to a psychologist or a mental health professional, they're going to give you the best psychological advice they have, but you're still in charge.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I think that about perfectly hidden depression, getting back to that topic,
absolutely.
Is that people have to. I had a guy. Well, I know I'm not finishing my sentence. I had a guy this week say to me, I was saying something about me and my husband, and that I had. We have 26-year marriage, but we have this sunken den, and he was coming down years ago to the sunken den, and I'd had a really hard day, and I said something about, I'd kind of like to just be myself for a while. And he goes, okay, I've been married to you long enough. I know I'm not supposed to take that personally.
Right.
And I said, no, you're not. I love you, but I just want to
easy way to say that.
Right?
Yeah.
And the person who does struggle perfectly in depression said to me, you mean you can say that you really didn't want to be with him right now? You can admit these things, and you can talk about discomfort or disappointment or frustration or irritation or wanting to be alone or whatever it is, and that's allowed.
Wow.
And I said, yes, that's allowed.
About what they've said to other people for so long.
Very, very scripted and careful. So, and the other thing that has been, everyone that has been interviewed, almost everyone, has said, I am so lonely. I am so incredibly lonely. And when I perhaps was about to end my life, I didn't feel like anybody knew me. I hadn't let anyone know me. And it's just you can convince yourself that that no one ever will, and so why live?
What do you do for these patients to help them?
Well, I think the very first step, first of all, in just trying to identify, you can go on my website at drmargaretrutherford.com, and there's several articles about the different characteristics. There's a questionnaire to take to see if you might identify with it. And so just the labeling of something and identifying something, yes, thank you, is very helpful in saying, just like if you identified for the first time that you would call something an eating disorder, where you had just said, I eat healthy. And someone says, well, no, it's really an eating disorder. It's like turns on light bulbs for you. Just like somebody says, you're having a panic attack, that turns the light bulbs on for you. So I think if someone says, this is perfectly hidden depression. Oh, okay. Or it's just classic depression. Now it all makes sense. And that's what in the emails I've been getting. So part of it is the identification and the acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
The next part, of course, is much harder, which is how do you change? And one of the first basic steps is to try to find out one person, allow yourself to think of one person that you could tell who you really are, what really your experiences have been in life.
Mm-hmm.
Just simply that opening up can be huge, whether that's a therapist, whether it's a friend, whether it's your spouse, whether it's a pastor, whether it's who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But there are definitely some specific things that are about developing different habits about revealing yourself, cutting yourself some slack, better self-care, doing everything from deciding that you can say no to things, that your worth is not involved in an accomplishment. That yes, we all like to accomplish things, but your worth is about being, not about accomplishing.
Right.
There's some conceptual things to understand. There's some behavior change to make. And also, sometimes these people can be in relationships with people who count on them to be over-functioning. So a lot of times their relationships have to change because they're now saying, I'm overworking in this relationship and I need to back off and take care of myself. Or they're married to somebody or partnered with somebody that also doesn't want to talk about pain, also is very uncomfortable at doing that. So when they start saying, sometimes I feel like I want to hurt myself, or that maybe not quite that dramatic, but that they say, I really don't want to be chair of the PTO next year, and I'm tired of it, and I don't want to do it anymore.
Why
that the other partner doesn't say, well, why not?
Yeah.
You love it.
Right.
And that they really listen.
They feed that. Right. Yeah. Dr. Margaret, what are there people who don't know what the problem is? Like they've blocked it so much?
Yes.
So
it's
what
become so habitual. I've gotten lots of emails saying, I was shocked when I read your post on it because I had kind of known something was wrong, but I hadn't put it together. And when I found I didn't even think there was anything wrong with this. I just knew that at my core, I was unsettled. So it's a recognition. Yes, sometimes they don't know.
Is it important to identify the what as much as the effect, the actual?
I don't quite understand the question.
Is it important for them to identify what it was that triggered that?
Yes.
Or that caused it? Or can they go on just knowing that there's something?
Well, I think knowing what it was that might have helped develop it gives you compassion for yourself. And then you could also start identifying the triggers. For example, if your trigger was, it's my job to, I worked with a woman yesterday. This is her trigger. Her father is abusive. Her mother, but he's very wealthy, her mother has stayed in the relationship due to the wealth, but counts on the daughter literally to tell her what to do all the time. And the daughter is now totally believes that, or has before she came into therapy, totally believed that it was her responsibility to take care of her mother. I mean, financially, emotionally, every way. Okay. And she was mothering her mother. And so as we begin, and of course, what is happening to her as she tries to leave the home, she's suffering tremendously, thinking she's doing something wrong. Right. She's trying to be perfect, and she thinks she's doing something wrong by becoming her own person. So she has these incredible dives into self-loathing. And it wasn't until I said to her, but it's not your job to take care of your mom. It's your job to leave your mom. Yeah. And she looked at me like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah,
I've got to take care of my mom.
Right.
And you want to be kind to your mom. You want to be respectful to your mom. You want it, but your mom has created her own life and her own choices. So, yeah.
That's important. That's so. I think that I read in your notes or at some point that you felt like this was something that was happened more with men, or that it's coming. Is there something like?
No, I don't think it happens more with men. There is a book that was written back in 1998 by Terrence Real called "I Don't Want to Talk About It," and it was about covert depression.
I've heard that.
And it's a really good book. The book is rich with all kinds of clinical details. He took like I've tried to do today with you. He took real life people who had this problem and told their clinical stories, I'm sure with their permission. And so, but I think it's true of both men and women. My mother actually probably had a great example of this, and I'm not so sure. I haven't had traits of it during my lifetime, especially like in my 20s. So I kind of learned that
anybody,
yeah.
And like we said, even if you've already been, diagnosed or consider having some type of depression, you can also have this hidden thing, because you've had people say, there's something I didn't tell you, that I've been weighing on them. So it's kind of another layer.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine distinction, because back to your question of can both exist at the same time,
Right.
I'm not saying or inferring at all that people with classic depression are somehow have absolutely no trouble telling people they're depressed. I think they do.
Right.
But they are more, their symptoms are more classic. They have the weight gain, they have the appetite, they have sleep disturbance, they have hopelessness, helplessness, difficulty with thinking clearly. They have more of the classic symptoms of depression, and they're going to get recognized more readily by the therapeutic community because of that.
Right.
The people I'm trying to reach are the people who don't look like that at all, and yet have this layer of self-loathing or shame or pressure or perfectionism that is driving them in ways that is also trying to hide, and is a way of hiding their depression from themselves and other people.
There's some things that you've talked about that could help that person. If somebody's watching right now and starting to say, gosh, that's me, what would the first thing they do should be? What should they do, and what can they do to come through this and make a change in their life?
Sure. If they begin accepting it, I think then they can, you can go on my website and
right.
I had things like
connect with Dr. Margaret. Yeah, that's the first thing.
I am the only answer. So. No, kidding. Brene Brown has written about perfectionism beautifully and eloquently, and her books address this. The only thing that Brene Brown doesn't do, to my knowledge, she doesn't make the connection between hiding imperfections and depression. I'm just taking it a step further. So what people can do is begin to assess their choices. Like, do I really do anything for myself? Do I really, am I ever on the top of my list? Do I ever rise to the top? Or am I constantly putting other people first? And what am I getting out of that? What am I trying to hide from? If I weren't smiling all the time, what would I feel? Very sort of introspective self-assessment.
It's so important. It really is.
And then risking beginning to open up and look different to people, and to yourself.
Right. Because you've gotten used to how you are.
And you're highly invested in looking and having other people see you as that person.
Right. Wow. the mind is just, it's, God bless you for doing what you're doing, or
Well, thank you very much.
it really is. It's so hard, but it's so important. We can live so happily, and I get that a lot, because my message is about positivity and being happy, and people will tell me, I just, can't be happy all the time, and you shouldn't be happy all the time. Well, you know what? I'm not, but I don't come on. I just have a strict policy not to put negative things out in the world. I have a way that I handle it. I journal, I talk with my husband, I, watch movies, stay in bed, and I deal with it. And then I move on, and, but because my message is about positivity, that's what I share outwardly. So people who really know me know that I am not happy all the time, and people who are with me all the time can see on my face if I'm not happy very easily. Sure. So,
one of the other things is that people with perfectly hidden depression will say to me that they think that self-focus or self-awareness or self-care is selfish.
Yes, I've heard that too. Okay. I've heard that too.
So they're getting confused with. I've had a couple of posts on the difference between self-awareness and self. What's the word I'm looking for? Too much focus on the self, narcissism.
Right. Or I can see that. It's hard for people to decipher the difference and to understand. So we're convincing some people to take care of themselves and take care of number one. I've always said, take care of number one, because you're your best advocate, right?
Sure.
And you got to take care of yourself. But then other people need to learn or to hear that, that's what's the opposite of that, where you can't focus entirely on yourself. That doesn't mean to forget.
I remember, that show
else.
Wife Swap. Remember the show Wife Swap?
Yes.
There's a show one time. I sometimes
got counting your blessings, right?
I food out watching it, and there was someone who was one of the wives was like a real martyr and never did anything for herself. I mean, she never did anything for herself, and she was swapped with this woman who had what she called me time, and literally she was with her kids about 30 minutes a day. So
it's all about the me time.
Way too far.
Right. Yeah. So that's the balance. Having a life balance has been kind of the code word. Try not to say that because, it was overused for so much. But it really is finding a balance for what's healthy and what works for you, or your rhythm, or understanding what's your rhythm. That's for me, that's what works. But understanding. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to say one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this and trying to get the word out is that maybe people don't know it, but the suicide rate is going up. It's not going down. Even with all the work with mental health stigma, mental illness stigma, the suicide rate is going up for men between the ages of 45 and 52, I think, and for women between the ages of 50 and 55. So, and I'm talking about going up dramatically. So we've got to do something. Yeah. And I'm hoping that talks like this, thank you so much, by the way, Melissa, for inviting me on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm hoping that this kind of awareness, and I should sell my new, podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
it's called Self-Work, and I have 3 podcasts on it so far, so it's really new. Wow. But one of the third one is on perfectly hidden depression, and I'll give more examples there, and then there's going to be a part 2 of that, which is going to be about what you can do about perfectly hidden depression.
You have a podcast called Self-Work.
I do. It's on iTunes now.
That's great. I want everybody to go look that up, because that is what it's about, really. You've got to do the self-work. You've got to invest in yourself and take care of yourself. And because, it's like putting that oxygen mask on first, right? And then you can be everything you want to be to everybody else. And I think one of the things that I wrote down that you said, your worth is about being, not in accomplishing. I think that's so important. That's, that's my message right there, is about being and accepting and loving and understanding, and just cut yourself a break because that in itself is a beautiful accomplishment. It really is, when you can truly be happy being who you are and in your skin. And that doesn't mean you can't keep working on it and improving it. I have a long way to go.
Acceptance for me, Melissa, acceptance is not resignation.
Right.
Acceptance is just that, acceptance. And then you can work on it. You don't resign yourself. So, oh, well, I guess that's just going to be me.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't like it, change it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's really neat. I would love to check into your podcast. When do you post?
I'm right now. I'm posting a little more than I'm going to normally, but because I'm just trying to accrue some podcasts on there. Oh, sure. But it's going to be biweekly.
Mm-hmm. And have you? You have a wonderful video presence. Have you thought about doing a live video? You could do it right on your Facebook.
Well, I have done a couple, and I did one on the Mighty that actually did on Perfectly Hidden Depression, in fact, and it did really well. So I had all kinds of comments coming in because it was Facebook Live. So I'm doing more and more of that. But,
good.
Yeah.
I hope to see you more doing that. That's kind of where I live. Like I said, I kind of just pulled out of the podcast. I'm just doing too much. But so there's sometimes you have to pull back. But so, I think that's great. So we're going to be looking for your book on Perfectly Hidden Depression. We're going to be watching, listening and looking out for your podcast, Self-Work. And we're going to go to drmargaretrutherford.com.
Yeah, it's a very original title, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's the best. Your name is not going to change no matter what projects you're working on and what wonderful things you're bringing to people. And if you're I don't know, do you still taking patients? Do you have it?
Yeah, that never ends.
If you're in Arkansas, you've got to see this person. And if I might have to, if I ever need help, I'm going to definitely look you up and online. I'm telling you.
I should say too that my email, and you can now that I respond to email.
Yeah, you do.
Ask Dr. Margaret at drmargaretrutherford.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Ask Dr. Margaret. Well, it is 7:00, and I know that the world is watching to find out,
big day.
What's happening here in the U.S. with our presidential election. And so it may explain why there's only one person watching us on Facebook. But this is going to be replaying, and I've shared it out, and you can share it too. So we can learn more about Dr. Margaret Rutherford and Perfectly Hidden Depression, because we need to do something about the suicide rate, and we need to help people and help ourselves, because there could be something you're holding back, and just a matter of asking the right questions and valuing who we are for who we are and not what we are. So
I totally agree.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Melissa, so much. Enjoyed it.
I just love having you here anytime. I look forward to talking to you again and seeing everything that you're doing. And thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
Such a pleasure. I'll see you soon. I'm going to go offline. So goodbye, Facebook. Good night, everybody. Oh, boy, I should say a few things too. I have coming up. Oh my goodness, I always forget this part. You know what? On Thursday, I have a special episode with Sarah Greer, and she is a copy conversion expert. She's helping people launch their businesses with using the right copy. She's an excellent copywriter and has really helped me, pointing out to not put an exclamation point at the end of every sentence and things like that. She has some really practical tips that I've learned from her that I'll always remember. I actually edited my book going in and checking some of those things. But so I'm anxious to see what she's up to now. And she's going to be with me on Thursday at 4. And then every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. right here on Facebook Live. Join me for Tinsel Town with Miz Meliz. And thank you. Thank you again for being here, and good night, everybody. Good luck. Let's see, the election. Oh.